Welcome to Literacy Mindset, where education leaders from across the country share strategies for improving K-12 instruction today and preparing for the challenges of tomorrow. The stakes are high. Students are facing new academic demands, and educators are navigating an ever-changing educational landscape. Each episode, we explore the most effective literacy initiatives, innovative tools, and strategies that are reshaping education. Whether you're an educator looking to improve student outcomes or passionate about driving meaningful change in schools, the Literacy Mindset brings you the insights and strategies you need to stay ahead. This is where education leadership meets real-world impact.
All right, welcome. Welcome, Dr. Sam Coleman is my guest today on the Literacy Mindset podcast. We're really excited to have you here, Assistant Superintendent of Instruction for the Oshkosh Area School District. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this conversation, and thank you for what you do to amplify the work that school districts and organizations are doing to address this topic of literacy. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, you bet. It's so fun to be able to come together and talk about it. And you're right. You know, I was on with Superintendent of Lubbock, and then we talked in California, special ed. Now we're jumping over to Wisconsin. Like, tell us a little bit about Oshkosh, just in general, so the audience can get a sense of your demographics and kind of what you're working with in the school district.
Yeah, well, journey with me to the great state of Wisconsin. It's the hidden gem of the Midwest. I absolutely love Wisconsin. I'm born and raised here. Actually, I'm from Milwaukee originally. Milwaukee is about, if you do the speed limit, about an hour and a half away from the city of Oshkosh. But just a gem in the Midwest. Oshkosh is a city of about 67,000 people. And the school district serves just over 9,100 students. We're nestled right on a beautiful Lake Winnebago. And so if you think about just a city with beautiful lakes and green space and a more traditional town, I would say a place that people really value because this is a community that values family and tradition and excellence, a really close-knit place as well. So I've been here for about a year and a half, and this is home for me. I absolutely love Oshkosh. I get back to Milwaukee as often as I can, but also am reminded frequently how amazing it is and important it is for me to experience all that there is about the city of Oshkosh. And so, I encourage everybody to come and visit. We have a huge air show in the summer. It's a worldwide air show called EAA. And so most people, when they think of Oshkosh, they either think of the baby clothes, Oshkosh Bagosh, or they think of the air show. But beyond that, we have an amazing school district, and you'll hear me talk a lot about that today.
That's great. Well, I'm excited about that, and I do think that that's an important point to call out. You know, being out as an administrator, sometimes there can be a disconnect that happens, at least a perceived disconnect. But being out in the community, working alongside the educators and the students and the families that you're serving, that's such an important part of that. I love hearing you talk about that. All right, well, let's dive in then. Let's talk a little bit about the literacy journey that Oshkosh is on right now, and some of the things that have kind of transpired to get you to this place right now. Just where are we at literacy-wise in Oshkosh?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say that we are in extremely exciting times. I will geek out about literacy for hours and hours, and so my enthusiasm around where we are in our journey, it comes from an authentic place because I really believe in the work that we're doing and the progress that we're making, as well as the responsibility that we have to make sure that every student that experiences our school district also experiences the very best literacy instruction. Like many school districts in the United States, Oshkosh is transitioning from a previous model of teaching literacy that we know worked for some students, but for many students, they didn't get that explicit early literacy foundational skill development that we know matters for students to develop a love for literacy and a command for literacy skills as they get into middle school, older elementary, middle school, and high school. So when people think of high quality early literacy instruction, most people think just phonics, but there's so much more to early literacy than just phonics and phonemic awareness. It's that vocabulary, reading comprehension. And so for us as a school district, we are about a year into, I would say, an accelerated journey of evolving our literacy programming. So I would say we are currently field studying a literacy program in response to our state's reading bill, Act 20. And Act 20 is Wisconsin's literacy legislation that requires all of our public school districts to implement science-based instructional materials as it pertains to teaching students how to read. Also, we are required to screen for literacy skill development and identify students who might have challenges with literacy skills acquisition, and those challenges might be related to dyslexia, it might be related to or caused by gaps in a student's literacy instruction because of moving around, or maybe other interferences. And so, and we've done that screening, I would say, for years. But as we dive into smarter ways to assess student skill and identify needs, and then use that as a way to inform instruction, we're very early in that journey. I often describe it as this is a marathon and not a race. But we are approaching this marathon with a sense of urgency, knowing that we have 9,100 students in our system right now, and more to come that deserve the very best instruction as it pertains to learning how to read.
No, that's excellent. And I think understanding what high quality instructional materials, right, the HQIM movement is, and there's so many good resources now that help districts make some decisions about it, because there's a lot of stuff that's out there. How do you guys think about intervention? So let's maybe move from broad-based literacy instruction to what happens, or how do you guys make decisions relative to maybe gaps that form or other things that sort of on the journey to literacy. How do you guys make decisions around interventions, and how do you ensure that, like, especially underserved communities are taken care of?
Yeah, so I think about interventions from this perspective of the purpose of an intervention is to quickly identify a skills gap that exists, and then quickly address that skills gap with targeted instruction, targeted skills development. And then that targeted instruction and skills development should be aligned to the skills that students are learning in the core of instruction. In many cases, there's this huge chasm that exists between universal core instruction and then what might be happening in an intervention. So I'll give you an example. If I am a fourth grade student and I am learning about inferences and using inferences in my writing and in my reading to make predictions about characters and what might happen in the story. So anyway, if that is the topic that we're working on, but I'm really struggling with fluency. So if I am put into an intervention or a targeted learning strategy, I should still be exposed to opportunities to learn about inference making, and learn that same skill that my peers are also learning and developing, while also developing my fluency skills. And also, exactly. And so my thought is interventions should never replace what's happening in the core of instruction. The core of instruction and those skills and those standards should still be central to what that student is learning, and the intervention is paired with that to fill that gap so that the student can access that universal instruction. Also, the intervention should be evidence-based and science-based. So there should be a way to, at the very beginning, measure what a student's skill level is, and then some goals should be set around what we expect that student's skill level to be at the end of the intervention. And the intervention should not be this long 8 8-week or 16-week sentence, in some
Sure.
space outside of the classroom. Ideally, interventions could and should occur in very close proximity, if not in the same classroom, that I, as the student, am learning with my peers. I shouldn't have to get that intervention in a separate space. So I'm also looking for ways that interventions can be provided in an inclusive way, so that if I, as a student, need an intervention, I don't experience this what we call stereotype threat, and that is I'm pulled out of the classroom because Mr. Pendleton is my interventionist teacher, and he comes to the not that you would do this, but
Yeah,
he
he's a
comes to the
tough
door and
teacher.
he's like, "All right, Sam, come on, it's time to come on out and come get your intervention." That doesn't honor the dignity and the self-esteem of students who need additional support, and that need for support might be for different reasons. So let me also go back and say the intervention has to be responsive to and consider age appropriateness. So if I, as a fourth grade student, am lagging skills that I probably should have learned as a first grader or second grader, I shouldn't get first or second grade material while I'm learning that skill. So the intervention should be age appropriate. If as a fourth grader, the intervention should not have pictures of, I always say this because this is a real thing, turtles flying kites, right? Like, as a fourth grader, that shouldn't be the image I'm seeing when I'm getting my intervention. And I saw that, and that's a real example of a fifth grader that I observed in another school district participating in an intervention that had this cartoonish, very immature. And so this student hated getting interventions because it felt like it was childish. It wasn't age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. Also, I think that interventions should reflect or mirror the identities of not only the students who are participating in that intervention, but also the diversity of the world that we live in. So in the Oshkosh area school district, and this is not unique to Oshkosh, this is also a phenomenon that exists throughout the United States of America. But let me say this: the achievement gap in the state of Wisconsin is between Black students and white students. We lead the nation in our gaps in achievement in reading, and have for at least the last 15 years. So when we think about in our state, but also in the city of Oshkosh, who ends up in these interventions? What do the students look like? What is their cultural background, their linguistic and racial identity? In many cases, the large majority of students receiving these interventions and interacting with the materials in these interventions are going to be Black and brown students who are learning English as a second or third language, students who may have been identified as having either a behavioral disability or an academic disability, and the range. There also will be white students and Asian students and Latino and Hispanic students. So there will be a range. And the instructional materials, I think, should be engaging and should reflect the diversity of the students who are participating in that intervention, because that increases engagement. When students are able to see themselves represented in affirming ways in the material that they're reading, if they can connect to the characters and the content of that intervention, it makes it real, it makes it relevant, it makes it more engaging. So I'm looking for interventions that are engaging and that are relevant to the students they're designed to serve. And then lastly, the interventions have to demonstrate that they work and that students can translate the skills that they're learning in that intervention space to the core of instruction. And if not, then we shouldn't use them. And because we don't want students to become dependent on interventions. And often that is what happens, where we say, oh, well, we have all this data that might suggest this intervention is effective. But when the student returns to the core of instruction, the universal classroom, they aren't experiencing that same success that they did in that intervention space. And I think that is problematic. So the intervention should essentially prepare a student to independently develop their skills in the universal instruction space. And if they rely on an intervention or an intervention setting to take the place of universal instruction, we have a problem. So I think the intervention should be aimed to to be a temporary
In and
gap
out.
filler, that that student is not becoming dependent on to experience success.
Oh, okay. We got a lot to unpack here. That's
Okay.
some really good stuff there, and I
I
want to
told
kind
you
of.
I can nerd out on this, so
I love
jump
it. I
in
love
when
it.
you need to. Yeah.
I want to unpack a couple of things that you said there and see if you can give the audience a little bit more detail. So I'm going to break it into three groups. You kind of said initially that we need to make sure the environment is the right place for the intervention to happen, right? So kind of push in versus pull out type model. So let's start there. What do you do at Oshkosh to ensure that to have happen? Obviously, you can put a policy in place. This is how we do it, but how do you help facilitate it? Is that done with technology? Is that done with extra size in the classroom, extra chairs? Just kind of maybe walk us through some tactical things to make sure that that can happen. Because I get it philosophically, but that doesn't mean it's easy to have happen sometimes. So walk us through that.
Yeah, it's not easy, and there are complexities to this, but I would say the three ways that we, in a very pragmatic way, provide these interventions in an inclusive way would certainly be through the technology, also through materials that students use. So it might be through differentiated materials that students are supported with another person. Now, I use the person as the third and last component because I understand that human resources and people are one of our most valuable assets, but also super expensive. In many school districts, and including Oshkosh, we're making decisions about our staffing model and our staffing sizes. And so, ideally, yes, having a classroom with 18 students and two expert educators is a dream. I mean, it would be a dream come
Great.
true.
Right.
And we don't necessarily have that. But what we do want is a model that allows for our interventionists, our instructional assistants, our special education assistants, and our co-teachers to be able to provide what we call a collaborative teaching model. So beyond co-teaching, a collaborative teaching model where we have adults across expertise, even including our ELL assistants and our ELL teachers working in the classroom with our general education teachers to provide that differentiated, targeted instruction and intervention support. And when we don't have a person that can provide that, the technology certainly matters, being able to leverage that, but then also the materials that we would provide students and to scaffold or support them. All of that is the puzzle that we bring together in a really complex way to provide that inclusive support. To your point, philosophically, it all makes sense. To have a system that we can really pull that off in a streamlined way is our ideal state, and we're working to get there. As I mentioned, we're on a journey, and this is a marathon, and we have not perfected that model yet.
Sure.
So it's one that we are working on and developing our capacity to do that more efficiently.
Luckily, this isn't the literacy perfection podcast. This is the mindset. We got to make sure we're there and we're talking about it. We appreciate that. So, are you guys? Do you have enough devices? Are you one to one? How would you think about technology in shaping that policy?
Yeah, fortunately, we are one to one, and I think we've gotten smarter about how we leverage our technology. And like many school districts, the pandemic really forced us to learn how to use technology in meaningful ways and in ways that are engaging. We also, I believe that there is no replacement for a teacher. So technology is important, and technology is an important companion to the educator. But as an educator and as a cheerleader for our teachers, I always say that the technology and technological supports are not designed to replace a high impact educator. It's designed and should be leveraged to be a companion to that educator and to assist that educator in their efforts to support students.
Yeah, no, I love that. Obviously, we at Mindplay think a lot about technology. That's kind of what it is that we do. But but thinking about how we are the tool and amplify the great work that's happening in classrooms. That's all we think about, really. So love hearing that. Okay, so that was part one. Part two was you sort of talked about inside of the content of the intervention, how do we make sure that representation is there, that students get to see themselves in the work? So can you talk a little bit about how you ensure that? Do you have a committee that people kind of review content on a regular basis, or how does that work? Tell the audience a little bit about that.
Yeah. Again, we are on a journey and we are early in that journey. And I would say that there's more to be desired with how we ensure that representation is there. In our current state, we often find ourselves really pulling together resources and content to provide that representation, because in some of the materials that we're currently using, that representation is not there. And so teachers are relying on their own expertise and the relationships that they're building within the education community to have high quality resources that reflect the identity and the diversity of the students in the community that we serve. So we don't have a perfect way yet to ensure that representation is there, but it certainly is a priority that we've made, and teachers go through great lengths, and those who support our teachers, our instructional coaches and our interventionists and our educational assistants, go through great lengths to supplement, if you will, the intervention materials and instructional materials in the core of instruction to make sure that they represent and reflect the diversity and the identities of the students we serve.
That's great. No, we obviously feel very strongly about that as well, and I love hearing how you approach that. Okay, part three. Part three was got to make sure that it's effective, right?
Yeah.
Evidence-based. So is there, again, a committee or a process of review? I joke sometimes, if you go on any curriculum company's website today, the first thing they all say is, it works.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you guys vet that? What's the process that you go through to make sure that your interventions are actually working?
Yeah, so it matters to us that that there's some type of credible research and reliable data from that intervention. But to your point, every company or every vendor that provides an intervention will also have data to indicate that there's evidence of effectiveness. How we measure effectiveness and determine effectiveness in our local context is directly tied to key performance indicators that we've established. So we have key performance indicators, or KPIs, that stipulate what student growth and what student progress should look like. And so our evidence of effectiveness will be growth and progress as measured by key performance indicators. So while the effectiveness of the intervention and the materials matter in the context of when that intervention is being provided, we're looking at, in the grand scheme of things, when we measure student growth and student proficiency using our progress monitoring tools and our state assessments, how are students doing there? And if we see that students are not making optimal progress or reasonable progress, and the interventions are being used in a way that they were designed, we then have to make different decisions. So it's not always the intervention. Sometimes it's the use of the intervention. Sometimes it's the
Sure.
ability to provide that intervention consistently. So there are many reasons why we may not see optimal outcome. And so really being able to identify, is it the resource? Is it the way the resource is being used? Is there a need for additional coaching or professional development? Is there misalignment between the intervention and the skill that the intervention is focusing on and the standards that we're assessing on? So all of that, I think, matters in the process of determining the effectiveness and the alignment of the intervention and the overall academic outcomes that we have goals around through our key performance indicators.
That's great. Yeah, I think having indicators that people know about and they can reference All right, that's an important trait to be able to work through. Uh, okay, let's talk about buy-in. How how do you get buy-in? You're talking about a journey, right? And it's a marathon, and not everyone necessarily walked in and said, "Hey, Dr. Coleman, I can't wait to run this marathon with you."
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to say, "Hey, you ready to ready to put on your running shoes and go down this journey with me?" Talk to us a little bit about what is it what does it take to get buy-in? What are the things that you guys do, and how have you accomplished the buy-in on your literacy vision?
Yeah. Well, I think that first of all, many of us in the field of education are used to shiny objects being dangled in front of school districts, or sometimes sweeping legislation that comes in and says like whether you have buy-in or not, you have to have compliance. So
Right.
for me, like really, doing this dance between compliance and buy-in is a necessary dance. And what teachers care the most about, what I've found is teachers care about being able to make an impact in ways that are manageable and sustainable and that honor their craft as an educator. So when we're looking for buy-in, for me, it's being able to articulate the impact that this strategy will have on their students. Number one, students are the most important. The other part is the time and energy that it takes to implement this strategy. So teachers are going to think, yes, this strategy is being presented to us as being important. Can I take this on my plate right now? Can this be added on top of all the other things that I'm responsible for? Or will this alleviate some pressure and take some things off of my plate? And so for me, it's really being able to also articulate how does this fit into the other tasks and responsibilities that you are expected to carry out. And so really being able to be clear about that in our communication and over communicating that, I would say, is a way to get buy-in. And then I would say the third thing is having examples of success. Like the proof is in the pudding, and people want to know proof of concept before we all jump in and say that this is the direction that we are going in. Are there credible resources that we can engage in, or credible examples that we can refer to that would suggest beyond what the vendors have published on their website? Who can we talk to? Who can we jump on a call with, or who can we go visit that can provide us with proof of concept? So I think those three things matter when we're working to get buy-in and working to get folks on board with the direction of implementing and using a strategy with enthusiasm. And I'm saying enthusiasm because we've all been in situations where again
Compliance can drain the enthusiasm a little bit, right?
yeah, exactly. So the buy-in and the use of a strategy matters, and we have to really be all in. And so I would also say really being able to solicit input and feedback along the way is also an important aspect of that buy-in. And not that the feedback is going to necessarily influence the selection of a strategy, but it also allows us to see what support is needed. That input provides us with insight on what support do you need for this strategy to be successful. And so regularly asking that and then being responsive to what we learn when we ask that question is also a way to not only get buy-in, but sustain buy-in. Because getting the buy-in, to me, actually is not the hard part. The hard part is keeping people on board and motivated during the implementation process. And anyone who studied implementation science knows that it takes sometimes 3 to 5 years for a strategy to be implemented well, and for there to be clear connections made between the use of this strategy and the outcome of what that strategy is aimed to produce. And so being able to keep people engaged and interested and keep their belief high during those initial phases of the implementation process, that's also important. So I would say being strategic and thoughtful about how we attend to and apply what we know about implementation science when we are introducing a strategy into a system is important.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to summarize that really as it's not so much about getting the buy-in, but it is about sustaining the buy-in that
Yeah,
matters.
right.
Those are wise words. Really appreciate that because you're right. Education gets a lot of shiny objects, and it feels like getting asked to be bought in is a regular thing.
Yeah,
How do we sustain that success? How do we sustain that buy-in throughout the implementation? That's a really critical part.
yeah, yeah. Teachers and educators are typically we are adaptable folks. Like we're in this rapidly changing. I know there's this narrative out there about education has looks the same now as it did 50 or 60 years ago. I don't think that that's true. I think we are always adjusting and adapting and learning and being flexible, and so we might not call it buy-in, we might call it flexibility or adaptability or things like that, but typically we adjust, and when we have new materials or new strategies or new resources, we're willing to experiment. We have a hypothesis about how this is going to work and how long it's going to be around, and the other acronyms that are going to come to replace that. Like those are all things that we do along the way. But the buy-in part is usually the that's not the hard part here. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, well, I think we could talk about this for a long time. We're gonna have to give ourselves a limit here. So I'll go with the last question as you kind of pointed to the past, right? Sometimes we get accused of looking the same as maybe we have for the last 50 years. Now let's look to the future a little bit. Take me 5 to 10 years from now. What do you see with the shifting or the initiatives that are going on? How do you see the world in education 5 to 10 years from now? And will it be substantially different, or will it be just kind of incremental differences or improvements from now?
So I think in the landscape of education, we will see the dividends of a focus on literacy pay off. I think we'll have more confident educators who understand the science of learning and the science of reading in ways that are practical and meaningful, and they'll have the confidence and the knowledge to address gaps, and to have a high bar and a high set of expectations for reading skill and ability, and they'll know what to do to be able to support students in reaching that bar. I do believe that is where we'll be 5 years from now. I also think that we'll have better alignment between the materials that we use in the core of instruction or universal instruction and the materials that we use to help students get caught up. Right now, there seems to be different worlds that students are expected to navigate, and those worlds are just 3 doors down the hall, or sometimes at a table right outside of the classroom, or even worse, sometimes at a table in the back of the classroom. And I think years from now we'll see better alignment between the strategies and the materials we use to help students get caught up through those interventions and targeted instruction. That will be better aligned with the standards and universal instruction that all of the students are engaged in, who may not need that additional support. And then thirdly, I think that we'll see, particularly from a literacy perspective, we'll see more collective ownership for literacy skill development. I don't think that it's just the reading teacher's responsibility to help students learn how to read. I think that, and it's not even just teachers' responsibilities. I think that students learn and they develop their skill for reading all day long, even when they're not in school, when they're home, when they're at the store, when they're in the community. And so I think 5 years from now, students will exist in this ecosystem or a landscape where their skill development for literacy will be sharper. I think right now, so many students and young people essentially are writing and communicating in shorthand. So everything is through text messaging and emojis and all these other things. So there isn't really, and that's not translating to what they need to be successful in an academic environment. And so hopefully 5 years from now, that will have cooled down and we see better use of the English language in written form and spoken form and read form that's not being replaced by the shorthand that many young people have grown accustomed to, writing in acronyms and all of the things that we probably think like the students know that they know how to write this or they know how to read this. They're just confusing text, what they might text their friend. But it's like, no, they really are writing IDK for I don't know on this.
On the paper.
Yeah, so I think we'll move away from that and get back to what you and I probably experienced in our early days of reading and writing, where we knew how to switch modes when we needed to switch modes. Yeah.
Well, that's encouraging. The future looks bright if we can really reinforce the literacy instruction that we've come to know over the last number of years and really lock into that. So if you're out checking out the air show in Oshkosh, don't forget to swing by and say hi to Dr. Coleman and the team over there. What a wonderful guest. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Again, and thank you for just allowing me just time and space to talk about something that I'm so passionate about. As I mentioned, just reeling me in is necessary because I can really get going about this. So again, and thank you for what you're doing to bring attention to such an important topic.
Thanks for tuning in. If you found today's conversation insightful, be sure to subscribe to Literacy Mindset. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube for updates, resources, and to join the conversation. Have a topic you'd like us to explore? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.